Hi, this is Sarah Mikesell with the Cattle Site, and today we're here with Dr. Mike Ballou. He is a professor at Texas Tech University. Thanks so much for being with me today, Mike.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Very good. And today, Mike and I are in Celina, Ohio at the 2025 Beef on Dairy Producer Summit that's put on by the Department of Veterinary Sciences, which is a partner of 4-Star Veterinary Service. And it's nice to be here. The conference this morning is enlightening, needless to say. And Mike, you just completed your talk today, and you shared a lot of research, and I'm going to have you kind of start there, but give us kind of an overview of some of the topics you covered.
Yeah, thanks. One of the topics that we've done some recent research on is really looking at the differences between raising beef on dairy calves versus like Holstein or dairy replacements. And at my Texas Tech research facility, that was one of our objectives a few years ago, was really to try to understand, is there a difference in how we need to manage these calves?
Right.
Or what are some of the unique challenges or the benefits of feeding these beef on dairy calves? And one of the things that we observed in our data was that beef on dairy calves, the impact that early life diarrhea has on performance of these calves is much greater. So we saw a 20, 21, 22 pound difference in weaning weight among beef on dairy calves that got scours than beef on dairy calves that didn't get scours.
That's significant.
It's huge. It's really hard to get a difference that large by almost doing anything. Where we typically see in Holsteins, we may see a 5 to 8 pound difference in weaning weight with calves like Holstein calves that get scours versus didn't get scours.
Right. Very good. And what were some of the additional results? I know there were some kind of, you made some suggestions because of this diarrhea issue, right?
Yeah, so we focused, I do a lot of research on trying to improve intestinal or gut health of animals. So I showed a list of things. Like I said, a lot of these things have some potential benefit in improving gut health of these calves, especially in the first 3 weeks of life. And so I just highlighted a couple of them. One of them being, feeding transition milk or low levels of colostrum for an extended period of time for the first few days of life, kind of helping stimulate the development of the intestines. And then I also showed some data about a ceramic particle or a binder that we created that binds pathogens that when it's fed in the milk, and there's pathogens in the intestines, it binds it and then therefore doesn't allow that pathogen to interact with the intestinal cells in the calf.
And you also said that, some of these calves maybe need to wait a little bit, right, before they're moved.
Yeah, so looking at starter intake, I think it's important to understand at some point we're going to wean the calf, we're going to remove the milk, and we got to make sure that these calves are consuming. And as a group, maybe 90% of them are consuming enough that we can wean them, but there may be 5 to 10% that we have to maybe continue to feed milk for an extended period of time. Maybe it's another week, maybe it's another 2 weeks just to get them caught up. Because if we try to wean them with the rest of them, they're most likely going to fall behind, and we're just going to compound that problem and not give them a chance to catch up. I mean, we do it with our kids. I mean, so why don't we do it with our calves?
Right. And are those calves easy to identify, Mike?
Yeah, typically they are easy to identify. So what we typically do is the week before we're about ready to start weaning, there's a certain day we drop a fixed amount of feed. The buckets have been cleaned, there's a fixed amount of feed, and then we go and look at how much was left visually. And we can identify those calves that maybe aren't consuming enough calf starter that we need to say. And you can also visually see them. They're maybe not quite as big as well.
Very good. Excellent. And you also talked about protocols for transporting calves, right? Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, specifically I was talking about transporting calves in the first week of life. So a lot of these beef on dairy calves, we're up here in Ohio, and there's feedlots in here, but there's a lot of feedlots as you start moving south, Kansas, Nebraska, Texas. And so there's a lot of calves that make their way from up in this area down that area in the first week of life. So we were just talking about, calves in the first 3 weeks of life are more susceptible to becoming dehydrated. And so really just working on shipping protocols relative to feeding electrolytes and also feeding milk before we put them on a trailer. And really what I was highlighting was when you feed milk to a calf, milk stays in the stomach for 6 to 8 hours.
Right.
When you feed just electrolyte, most of that fluid is absorbed within 2 hours. So a lot of times what I do as we're preparing to ship, we'll feed electrolytes about 4 to 5 hours before we load them on the trailer. And then I feed them a bottle of milk about an hour or two before we load them on the trailer. Because it's going to give them 6 to 8 hours of milk where they're absorbing while they're getting transported. And then when we unload them, I do the exact opposite. I feed them electrolyte first because it's going to get those fluids absorbed really quickly. It's only about 150 calories, so the calves are still hungry. So when I give them a bottle in 2 hours after I give them that bottle of electrolyte, they're going to eat. They're going to drink that. So yeah, it goes electrolyte, milk, electrolyte, milk. So.
And you were saying that the electrolyte makes a big difference fast, right? It's quick. It's I mean, I take electrolytes sometimes too, the liquid IV or different things you can get just when you're feeling a little bit like a little dehydrated from travel or whatever reason, right? And this is the same kind of thing.
Yeah, no, definitely. Like there's not a lot of, I mean, there's a lot of ash or electrolytes. There's minerals in there. There's not a lot of calories. And so that fluid leaves the stomach pretty quickly and goes to the intestines where it's going to get absorbed. The thing about the stomach is when you feed a meal of milk and it's a energy dense, lots of protein, you know, all that digestion absorption takes place after the stomach in the intestines, but the stomach's job really is to hold it and release it slowly to the intestines where it gets absorbed. So it makes a lot of sense. The other thing I did talk about was there's different formulations of electrolytes, and we typically want to have a buffer because calves that get diarrhea, their blood gets a little acidic, and you don't want that. And so we want to buffer the blood a little bit. And so historically we had used baking soda or bicarbonate to do it. But the problem is when you feed bicarbonate in an electrolyte, it increases the pH of the stomach, and bacteria, if there's nutrients there, will go crazy. So they'll start growing like crazy. And so we use something called an acidified buffer, which is kind of an oxymoron in the sense that like you're using an acid to buffer. It's called an acidified because it's in the stomach, it doesn't buffer. It's kind of actually acidic a little bit. But once it gets absorbed into the body and metabolized by the liver, it produces bicarb in the blood. So it buffers blood, it doesn't buffer the stomach. So that's a real important differentiating factor too, especially if you're feeding electrolyte and you think there's some residual milk for whatever reason, you want to make sure you're using acidified electrolyte.
Very good. Well, hey, thank you, Mike, so much for all the information. And I could tell your talk was very popular by the long line of people who were there to ask you questions afterwards, because these are hot topics, right? I mean, the value of these calves, these beef on dairy calves, has certainly risen, and people are really trying to do the best job they can with these calves, right?
Definitely. And I appreciate talking with producers. I own a couple calf raising facilities myself, so it's always fun. I always say I learn from you guys too, so I've learned just having conversations, and so I'm excited to be here, and thanks for having me today.
Very good. Thanks again. I appreciate your time today, Mike. This is Sarah Mikesell with the Cattle Site.